Trump gives disaster speech on war to tiny crowd. Donald Trump walked onto a stage at a financial conference in Miami and delivered the kind of performance that would be funny if it weren't so dangerous. Not dangerous in the abstract, like a cringe speech that makes America look unserious for a day on cable news. Dangerous in the way a man can be dangerous when he treats the architecture of U.S. alliances, global deterrence, and hard-earned credibility like props in a one-man grievance show. The transcript reads like a spiraling monologue where the punchlines are national security liabilities and the applause lines are invitations for autocrats to take notes. This is the part the MAGA movement wants you to ignore. Trump doesn't merely misunderstand alliances like NATO, he resents them. Not because he has a coherent doctrine about burden sharing or a sophisticated critique of collective defense, but because alliances require something his political brand cannot sustain: reciprocity, consistency, and an adult relationship with facts. When he toys with the idea that the United States doesn't have to be there for NATO, he's not negotiating. He's broadcasting vulnerability. He's announcing out loud that America's word is conditional, transactional, and subject to whatever mood he's in at a lectern. In the transcript, he frames it as a kind of breaking news revelation, as if he's doing the world a favor by threatening to abandon the bedrock security framework that has prevented a catastrophic great power war in Europe since 1945. Let's be clear about what that means in practice. NATO isn't a charity club where the United States shows up with a blank check because we enjoy protecting them. NATO is a deterrence system. It is an insurance policy against the very scenario Trump pretends to fear: an unstable, heavily armed world where conflict escalates quickly. If you undermine that deterrence, you don't reduce the odds of war, you raise them. If you teach adversaries that U.S. commitments are flimsy, you invite tests, little probes that become crises, that become wars. That's how deterrence fails. Not with a dramatic declaration, but with a steady drip of unreliability that convinces the other side they can get away with more. Trump in the transcript doesn't sound like a leader guarding deterrence. He sounds like a man auditioning to be the world's most powerful bad faith negotiator. And then there's the other darker undertone, the shameless authoritarian romance. The transcript's framing loosening sanctions, signaling softness toward adversarial regimes, lashing out at allies while flattering strongmen, fits a pattern that has defined Trumpism from the beginning. A movement that wraps itself in the flag while treating democratic alliances with contempt and treating autocratic leaders with suspicious tenderness isn't America first. It's America alone, America isolated, America easier to bully. The cruelty is the point domestically, the chaos is the point internationally. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's observable behavior. This is why the spectacle matters. A Trump speech is never just a speech. It's a message to multiple audiences at once. To his base, it's a performance of dominance. He gets to sneer at losers, posture as the only winner, and insult anyone who doesn't clap on cue. To wealthy donors, it's a promise that the chaos will be profitable for the right people because the rules will bend to power and proximity. And to adversaries watching from abroad, it's a neon sign flashing: America can be coerced, America can be divided, America can be manipulated by ego. The transcript captures another revealing moment: the bizarre fixation on renaming the Strait of Hormuz, slipping into the Strait of Trump, stumbling over the words, then trying to preempt the criticism by declaring there are no accidents with him. It would be tempting to treat that as mere comedic fodder, another late-night clip. But what's actually on display is more corrosive: the personalization of statecraft. He cannot speak about a strategic choke point without imagining his name attached to it, like signage on a casino. That isn't just vanity. It's the worldview that everything, territory, alliances, diplomacy, military posture, exists to validate him. When that worldview drives policy, you don't get coherent strategy. You get impulsive moves that serve the ego first, and the national interest, incidentally, if at all. And notice how quickly the transcript moves from geopolitical stakes to Trump's emotional needs. He says he likes to hang around with losers because it makes him feel better, and he doesn't like very, very successful people because he has to listen to their success stories. preferring people who listen to his. That is not an offhand joke. It's a confession. It's the psychological blueprint of Trumpism. Dominance over competence, loyalty over expertise, flattery over truth. A leader threatened by successful people is a leader threatened by strong institutions, because strong institutions don't flatter you. They constrain you. NATO, in that sense, is not just an alliance. It's an institution that demands mutual responsibility and punishes erratic behavior with consequences. That is exactly why it intimidates a man who experiences constraints as humiliation. Then comes the rhetorical sleight of hand MAGA has normalized. Redefining MAGA to mean protecting a list of specific allies, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, as if the movement's principle is simply helping certain countries. Full stop. The deeper issue isn't the mention of allies, it's the framing. It's not a defense strategy grounded in treaties, regional stability, or long-term US interests. It's a vibe. It's a transactional slogan. And it's delivered in the same breath as broad contempt for alliances like NATO, which is arguably the most central alliance the United States has. That incoherence is not accidental. It's what you get when politics is organized around personal allegiance rather than a consistent worldview. The transcript also swims in the swampy waters of war talk, boasts about obliterating an adversary, claims about leaders being all dead, language that treats massive violence like a scoreboard. This is one of the most morally bankrupt habits of the Trump era, the gamification of war. The audience is invited to feel powerful, not responsible, to feel triumphant, not sober. And when the media reports complexity, ongoing threats, unresolved conflicts, the reality that military actions have consequences, Trump's move is to call it almost treasonous. That word choice isn't random, it's authoritarian. It's an attempt to criminalize dissent and delegitimize accountability. If you say we're not winning, you're treasonous. That is how strongmen insulate themselves from reality until reality arrives with a crash. And there it is again, the perpetual need to cast himself as the singular savior. In the transcript, he paints a lurid picture of being 2 weeks away from catastrophe, nuclear dust, then insists he saved the world. This is the Trumpist storytelling engine. Raise the stakes to apocalyptic levels. Center yourself as the only one who can stop it. Then demand loyalty as repayment. The problem is that democratic governance cannot be built on savior myths. It has to be built on institutions that function even when one leader is gone. When your politics depends on a hero narrative, you start treating everyone else as either a villain or a prop. That's exactly what the transcript shows. Allies are props until they frustrate him, then they become freeloaders. Advisors are props until they displease him, then they become disloyal. The press is a prop until it tells the truth, then it becomes the enemy. A particularly telling element is the casual glorification of insider operatives and nepotistic power structures, talk of high IQ teams and name-dropping figures like Jared Kushner, as if diplomacy is a family business. Venture staffed by people whose primary qualification is proximity to Trump. That's not strategy, it's court politics. Democracies are not supposed to be run like royal households. When foreign policy becomes a nepotistic brand extension, the incentives warp. Decisions get shaped by who profits, who gets access, who gets to be special, not by what keeps Americans safe and preserves global stability. The transcript also captures the whiplash of Trump's self-congratulation. He calls his first term great, insists a second term is blowing it away, and talks like the stock market and oil prices are just another scoreboard he can manipulate with swagger. This is a hallmark of Trump's political scam, reducing complex systems into simple bragging rights so supporters feel like they're winning even when the underlying reality is more fragile. When he hints that gas prices could be much higher, it's treated like a shrug, as if ordinary families are chips in a casino game. That's the core betrayal of MAGA populism. It sells itself as the champion of the working class while repeatedly revealing a contempt for the lived consequences of its own chaos. What emerges from the transcript isn't just a bad speech. It's a worldview. A worldview where alliances are protection rackets, where war is theater, where criticism is treason, where the leader is the state, and where policy is whatever flatters the leader most in the moment. That worldview is profoundly incompatible with the democratic, rules-based order that has imperfectly, often hypocritically, but materially reduced the frequency of major power wars and expanded prosperity across decades. You don't have to be naive about America's past to recognize that a world where the United States abandons alliances and normalizes authoritarian rhetoric is not a safer world. It is a world where violence becomes more likely, where nuclear brinkmanship becomes more tempting, and where democracies become more fragile. And that's the point that needs to be driven home. Trump's rhetorical deterioration and his policy vandalism are not separate issues. The rambling, the ego, the grievance, the impulsive threats, those aren't quirks. They're the mechanism. They are how he signals to supporters that he will break norms, and how he signals to adversaries that he can be leveraged. The tiny crowd vibe isn't just about optics, it's about insulation. The smaller the room, the fewer the dissenting faces, the more Trump can drown in the echo of his own myth. If you want to understand why Democrats and pro-democracy coalitions treat Trumpism as a serious threat, don't start with the memes. Start with moments like this speech. A former president casually toying with undermining NATO, glamorizing regime change bravado, lashing out at the press as treasonous and describing his own emotional comfort with losers while mocking competence and success. That's not leadership. That's a character profile of someone who experiences the presidency as a stage for personal validation, not a responsibility to steward a democracy. And if you're tempted to dismiss it as just talk, remember the lesson of the Trump era. The talk is the policy preview. The insults become purges. The threats become real-world leverage. The contempt for alliances becomes real-world abandonment. The demand for loyalty becomes real-world coercion. In a functioning democracy, speeches are supposed to be accountable to reality. In Trump's America, reality is supposed to be accountable to the speech. That inversion is exactly how democracies slide into authoritarianism slowly, loudly, with the crowd laughing until they realize the joke is on them. If you want, paste the paragraphs you want me to preserve most closely, or tell me rewrite tighter, rewrite more Maddow style, or rewrite calmer, more legalistic, and I'll do a second version with the same facts but a different voice.